guys, welcome back to my channel, and welcome to, finally, my December of 2021 wrap-up. So I had a pretty decent reading month in December, mostly because I was trying to force myself through as many books as I physically possibly could. I came so close to doing so. I ended up reading, let's see, I think I needed 18 to complete my Goodreads goal. I think that I ended up reading 16. So, we were 2 away, but that's okay. I'm not putting any pressure on myself. I essentially came to the reading goal that I wanted to. Those last 2 books don't really make that much of a difference in the long run. So, I read 16 books in the month of December, and those 6 books ended up totaling 3,413 pages. So of all of those 16 books, 1 of them was a dystopian, 4 of them, unsurprisingly, were fantasy, 1 was a romance, 4 of them are sci-fi. I think that I might need to reevaluate my genres because you can be both a short story and be sci-fi, and that is the case that happened here. So I have 4 of them included as sci-fi, and then 2 of them included only as short stories or novellas. Those were also sci-fi as well. And then I read 4 graphic novels. And I'm definitely reevaluating it for last year just because graphic novels were the ones that I read. They were mostly fantasy with 1 sci-fi, I'm pretty sure. So we're reevaluating it on my spreadsheet for next year. Fortunately, that's pretty easy for me to change, but yeah, I'm just gonna throw that out there. As far as my star ratings go, I had 7 that I gave 5 stars to, 7 that I gave 4 stars to, and 2 that I gave a 3-star to. So overall, it was a pretty good reading month. I have gotten away mostly from getting into books that I'm only going to rate 1 and 2 stars. I think that I've said this in a previous video, but I do know what I generally tend to enjoy, and if I don't enjoy it, or if I don't think that I'm going to enjoy it, I try not to pick it up. So most of my ratings do tend to be on the higher side, and that is why I do have a lot of 5 stars, 4 stars, and then 3 stars just tend to be the lower end of my range, because obviously those are the ones that I thought I was going to love more than I did, and they ended up just being a little bit more hit or miss for me. In terms of the formats that I read them in, 3 of them I read only in ebook form. 1 of these was an e-arc, 7 I read only audibly, 4 of them I read as graphic novels or manga, they were graphic novels, and 1 of them I read in multiple different formats. And then for the age range, 13 of them were adult and 3 were YA. So the very first book that I finished in the month of December was Bisapray by Ayana Gray. I liked this, but I thought that I was going to like it more than I did. This did end up being my only 3-star read of the month, and I don't really know why. I don't really know what it was that didn't really work out about this for me. I do talk about it a little bit more in a reading vlog that I had towards, I think, the beginning of the month of December. It was good. The fantasy was interesting, the atmosphere was super interesting, the characters, I think, is where it was kind of going wrong for me. They read very young, and this is a young adult, so I think that that is kind of where my disconnect happened. I didn't really feel like I could relate to them at all. They were acting very young, they were making decisions that teenagers would make, so that's perfectly fine. I do think that a lot of people have enjoyed this book and would enjoy this book if you want to pick it up. You follow Kofi, who is a girl whose mother, I think just her mother, her family, I guess, owes a debt to the night zoo, and they are working at it in order to pay off their debt. However, something happens, tragedy kind of strikes, and she ends up kind of running away from the night zoo in hunt of a monster that is in the nearby jungle. You're also following Ekon, who is a boy who is training to be a legendary warrior in their community, and he kind of messes it up in a way, and so in order to rectify that, he also decides to track down this monster that is in the jungle, and they team up to do so, and events happen, and we kind of end on a cliffhanger that I wasn't super fond of. And I think that that's probably a part of my issue as well, because y'all know cliffhangers that I don't really think are necessary do kind of tend to drag my enjoyment of the reading experience down. That's not the reason this was a 3-star though. I just was struggling to have the desire to pick it up. I was struggling to want to read it. I ended up downloading it audibly and finished it that way, and it was fine. There's nothing wrong with this. I definitely think that if any of that sounded interesting to you, go ahead and pick it up, because the magic system was really cool. Like I said, the atmosphere was pretty cool. All of the mythology and lore was really great. It was just a little bit of a disconnect for me with the characters. I just never really connected to them. The next book that I read in December was The Bone Shard Emperor by Andrea Stewart. I had an e-arc of this that I had requested because I had read and really, really loved The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart previously last year, and I really enjoyed the second one as well. I did end up giving it a 4 stars. It's hard to talk about what happens in the book without spoiling the events of the first book. So The Bone Shard Daughter is about a couple of characters. Jovis, who is a smuggler who kind of just keeps falling into being a hero and being kind of held up as a hero because of the things that he keeps accidentally doing. And he has this adorable animal companion named Mephi, who is like an otter cat type thing. He's precious. Mephi makes the entire story for me. You also follow the Emperor's daughter, who is trying to learn bone shard magic, which arguably is one of the coolest parts of the entire book, and it involves inscribing different commands onto shards of bone that were once in a living being, usually human. I don't know if it can be a non-human. Don't take my word for that. And essentially you can create constructs using these shards of bone, and the bone shards direct their actions from there on out into their decisions and so on and so forth. She becomes very, very proficient in this use of this magic and ends up butting heads with her father over it. I don't really know how much more to say without spoiling the events of that, but the end of the first book was fantastic. I was obsessed with it, and so I was really hoping I was going to adore the second one just as much as the first one, and I did really enjoy it. I do think that it suffered from a little bit of second book syndrome, but I liked the characters, I liked the introduction of the new characters, and it was such a great reading experience. I can't wait for book 3. I gave it a 4 stars. For the sake of not having an hour-long video, I'm going to combine the next 3 books that I read into one kind of review, and that is the next 3 books in the Murderbot series, and that is Rogue Protocol, Exit Strategy, and Fugitive Telemetry. So I read pretty much all of these back to back. I might even have read them in one day. I listened to them audibly, actually, and I love the Murderbot series so much. I'm not really going to talk about the events of these 3 books. They're not necessarily spoilery. Maybe Fugitive Telemetry is a little bit for the events of the first book. They follow the adventures of Murderbot, who is a robot that is pretty much, well, it's in the name, designed to murder things. His goal is to be assigned to a group of humans from his company and protect them as they do mostly research on the planets that the company owns. And Murderbot does have human parts, so they do tend to experience some kinds of human emotions and some kinds of human thought processes as well. Murderbot has hacked its governor protocol, which means that it can pretty much do whatever it wants without having to follow the directions of the people that own it. And because of that, Murderbot likes to spend 90% of its time watching soap operas and dramas and so on and so forth. It's great. Honestly, the books are hilarious. They're incredibly relatable, which I don't know what that says about me because I am relating to a murderous android with human parts, but it is what it is. Murderbot is a fantastic character. I have heard, I think that they're developing an adaptation of it, and I'm pretty excited for that. I know that there is a full-length novel out as well that Martha Wells came out with, I think, last year, and I haven't gotten the chance to pick it up yet, but I am very, very excited to finish out what there is already of this series, and I can't wait to see where it continues. And all 3 of these novellas that I read last month got 5 stars from me. The next book that I read was written by one of my fellow booktubers, and that is Lauren from Lighting Lavender, or Lolalong over on Twitter. I read Artifact 299 under her author name, which is L.A. Binley. This is a novella, and it is about zombies in the UK, honestly, and it's great. You follow the main character, whose name I believe is Anna, and she is writing down her adventures, if you could call them that, of what is happening to her in the process of this zombie outbreak across the UK. She is trying to write a diary for future people, if they may find it, to see what has been happening and what she is experiencing, and it was honestly really, really good. I gave this 5 stars because I was hooked from the very beginning. I was so intrigued by the people that Anna and her companions came across. I was intrigued by the underlying mystery that was going on throughout the entire thing, and the ending was fantastic. I don't Might be a little bit hit or miss for some people, but the way that it ended made me crave way more of this. Lauren, please, I really need you to write more about what happened and what caused it, because that is what I would like to know. So if zombies are your thing, definitely go check out Artifact 299, and I definitely highly recommend it. Next up, I read The X-Hex by Aaron Sterling, and I enjoyed this. I gave it a 4 out of 5. This was one of my book of the months, I believe, in September, and it was a really good read. It was a cute little fantasy romance that I should probably tell you what it's about. But it's pretty much a second chance romance between Vivi and Reese, who met while she was in college at this local school, but it has like an underlying secret witches program, and she is a witch and Reese is also a, well, I think they call him a warlock. They had this very hot burning college romance that ended very badly when he sprung it on her that he was going to go back to England to break up with, or Wales, maybe it was Wales, to break up with his fiance that he was promised to, and then he would come back, and she didn't know that he was engaged because it was like a arranged engagement, I guess you could say. She didn't take it well. She broke up with him, and as she was sulking, she ended up kind of cursing him in jest. She didn't really mean for it to stick, but it did. And because of that, when he returned to, I think it's Penhallow, 9 years later, when he enters the place in which she placed the curse upon him, all of the effects started to hit, for the most part. Some rather hilarious effects that they had intended to hit did not actually hit, but that's okay. It's probably for the best. And if you read this, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But it was a cute little fun romance. There was not necessarily an evil that they were trying to defeat, but kind of. It was fun fantasy, fun magic, fun little contemporary urban witchiness, and I really enjoyed it. The audiobook was really, really good. The smut was pretty good, and if you have not read this, I highly recommend it. I'm pretty sure Aaron Sterling also wrote a book called Payback's a Witch, and after having read this, I am very intrigued to go ahead and read that next. Next, we get into my Brandon Sanderson short story novellas that I read, the first of which is The Emperor's Soul. I raved about this in my Best Books of 2021. This actually won my Best Books of 2021, and it is still one of my favorite things that I have read to this day. Everybody that has been on my channel for a while knows I am a Brandon Sanderson fan, but I don't know if I've talked much about this. His short stories, or novellas, they haven't really been it for me. I've really liked his full-length novels and works more, but The Emperor's Soul was incredible. I don't know why I had been putting off reading this for so long. I really don't have an explanation for it. It takes place in the world of Elantris, and you follow a character whose name is escaping me right now because I'm terrible at names, let's be honest. And she is a forger, and in this world, that means that she has the capability to rewrite pieces of one's soul via stamps. So what that means is that she can kind of change bits of somebody's history or personality or appearance or whatnot by changing pieces of their soul. And that works for inanimate objects as well. If she changes their history or whatever, she can change its appearance or what it was made out of, things like that. And this is relevant because the Emperor was almost killed in an assassination attempt and is now comatose. They don't think that he will come out of it. They think that he is essentially in a vegetative state at this point, and so they have hired her, also kind of held her for prisoner, also kind of caught her in the act of stealing something and used this as leverage to get her to do what they want. And they want her to examine everything they have from the Emperor's history, his diaries, and all of that stuff, interviewing people that he knows very well, to understand very deeply who he is as a person, so that she can create stamps for his soul to have him up and walking in his body. It's hard to describe how this works, but essentially she's recreating his soul so that he can walk around and be the Emperor. The characters in this, in such a short amount of time, absolutely gripped you. You felt 100% connected to the main character, everybody that she spoke to. You didn't even know the Emperor. He really was barely a speaking part of this entire short story, and yet what you learn through her eyes of him has you connected to him as well. It was just incredible. I absolutely need Brandon Sanderson to write more of these characters, or at least this magic system, because I'm so connected to them after such a short amount of time. I'm still thinking about this short story to this day. It was so, so good. Honestly, if you haven't read The Emperor's Soul, definitely go give it a chance. I listened to it audibly, and I don't regret that choice at all because the narrator, as per usual with Sanderson works, was fantastic. And it definitely got a 5-star for me. The next Sanderson short story that I read was the original, which is by Brandon Sanderson and Mary Robinette Kowal, I believe is her name. This is an Audible-only experience, but I'm counting it because I can. And it was essentially kind of a philosophical look on cloning and futuristic dystopia / utopia in which everybody can theme the world to look exactly the way that they want it to. And if certain people interacting with your world are not a part of your theme, you just don't really notice them. The actual story is about how she murders her husband, and when she wakes up, she's actually a clone of herself, and in this world, if you commit something like murder and you go on the run, a clone of you is created to chase you down because who else knows you better than yourself? And so she is trying to chase down her original and find out if she actually murdered her husband, pretty much do all of the investigative work. It has a couple of its, holes in that story because what does a random layperson know about truly investigating something like this? But it was honestly really interesting. The entire conversation about clones and right and wrong and all of that stuff, it was something, honestly. The ending kind of blew my mind. I kind of needed to look up what it meant. That really didn't clear much up for me in the end, but I have my theories, and it's one of those kind of ambiguous endings that you're meant to interpret whichever way you would want to, I think. Which really makes me feel a lot like the short stories that I was forced to read in like AP English in high school and whatnot, like The Lottery was one of them. It kind of gave me those same vibes, and I did really enjoy it, not as much as The Emperor's Soul. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars, but if you're interested in any of that, it was a really quick listen, and it was a really interesting story. Next up, I finally read the next book in the Witcher series, the second group of short stories, which is Sword of Destiny by Andrzej Sapkowski. This is, like I said, another group of short stories following the Witcher, Geralt of Rivia, as he is continuing on his adventures. This actually involves Ciri. If you have watched the TV show or played the video game, this is actually where Ciri comes into play, whereas they had only talked about the Child of Surprise and the Law of Surprise in the previous book. You actually do meet Ciri in this one, and I believe by the end of it, I believe they are together. So, I mean, it was good. There were a lot of really interesting stories in it, just like in the first one. I did give it a 4 out of 5 stars. I am one of those people that watched the TV show and then read the first book, and now I have read the second book before I finished watching the second season of the TV show. So I kind of knew what to expect from certain things that they touched on, but there were a couple of stories that I particularly liked, which was the dragon one that it starts out with that I believe was at the end of the first season of the TV show. The kind of Little Mermaid inspired short story that was in the second book was, again, one of my favorites. Anything that pulls in classic fairy tales, I'm automatically going to really, really like, and this was no different. So Sword of Destiny got 4 out of 5 stars. Can't wait to move on to Blood of Elves. Once again, we are grouping these next couple into the same category, and that is Sunreach and Redawn by Brandon Sanderson, and I believe there is a second author, Jancy Patterson, I believe is the other author on these. These are the 2 short stories out of 3. There is a third one that is out now, I'm pretty sure, that take place between Starsight and Cytonic in the Skyward series by Brandon Sanderson. It's his YA sci-fi. I think it's the only things that he's written that are not part of the Cosmere, and they're fantastic. If you haven't read Skyward, it is about Spensa, who is the daughter of somebody who is perceived to be a traitor, and because of that, she's kind of shamed as well. Her father died supposedly trying to run away from a battle, but she wants to become a pilot more than anything else in the world, and she's a little overly aggressive in terms of, like, everything, but it kind of works because she's kind of an awesome main character. So I did get my hands on Cytonic, which is the third book in the Skyward series, and I wanted to read the short stories before I dove right into Cytonic, so I read both Sunreach and Redawn before I've picked up Cytonic. I don't remember what the third one is called, the third short story. I do need to pick that up before I pick Cytonic up, but Sunreach got 5 stars for me, and Redawn got 4. I was just more interested in the characters and what was going on in Sunreach than I was in Redawn, but Redawn was also extremely interesting as well, to see that culture and to see those people and learn about that entire aspect of their corner of space. It was really, really cool. So I liked both of those, and I can't wait to read the third one and then move on to the third book in, I think, what is going to be a 4-book series. So now we move on to the last couple of books that I managed to read in December, which was the 4 graphic novels that I finished, and I kind of just read these in an attempt to shove as many books as I could in before the end of the year, but that's okay. I have no regrets, because it led me to reread the first volume of Fables and then move on to the second volume of Fables. And this was mostly because for Christmas, John got me The Wolf Among Us, which is a Telltale Games video game, and I finished it in like 3 days because it was really, really entertaining, and can't wait for them to make the second one. But Fables 1 and 2 essentially, well, Fables is a graphic novel series that follows a group of fairy tale characters that have been chased away from their home world by, I think it's called the Adversary, and so they are forced to live in modern-day United States. It's actually in New York. The ones that can pass as human get to live in New York City in their own kind of corner of the city, and the ones that cannot pass as human are sent to upstate New York to live at the farm. There is a lot of discussion of kind of classism in this because the fables that are able to appear as human are kind of considered to be superior to the ones that are not, and they are stuck on the farm. They don't love their living situation on the farm. That is what the second Fables volume is about, and how the ones on the farm are trying to get back to their homeworld and to take out the adversary and whatnot. These were really great. The art style is great, the humor is great. I enjoy every single second of it, to the point where I did go and buy the Fables Compendium, which is issues 1 through 44 of the entire Fables series. So I will be slowly working my way through that as time goes on. Hopefully I'll get mostly through it this year. It would be nice. I don't have any guarantees, but both of the Fables volumes 1 and 2 got 4 stars from me. I also finally picked up Blackheart, Welcome to Heartbreak. This is by Julian Thomas, who is a local author to us, and this I don't believe is available in very many places. I think you can find the e-copy on Amazon, but I don't think they have any physical copies on Amazon. You might have to order it from the author's website directly. This was really interesting. This particular issue follows a character who is just trying to steal something called fuel, which is created from something like lunar fragments, I believe. They use it in everything, but it's also in destroying their world, which is kind of a commentary on global warming and whatnot. But he's trying to steal it, so this entire first issue is about him attacking a place where it is stored and stealing a lot of it. I believe in the grand scheme of things, there is something involved him getting roped into a gladiator battle and being forced to lie to his wife, leave his wife, his significant other, something like that. But the art style is fantastic, the storyline, the action, all of it was really interesting. I would love to read more of this graphic novel series, and I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. And the very last thing that I read, because I was inspired by Spider-Man No Way Home coming out, well, I decided to attempt to read a lot of Marvel comic books. So I started with Thor, Son of Odin. That is issue 1 of that particular run of comics. I believe it came out in 2004, which was suggested to me as a starting place for the Marvel world. Obviously, I only read this one, so my Marvel readathon comic-wise did not get very far. But it was interesting. I didn't love the art style in it, but it involved Hela, and it involved Thor and Sif being in love with each other, and Thor trying to sacrifice himself to save Sif from Hela, and it was okay. I gave it 3 stars. I would be okay with continuing on in that series. Thor is, I don't have any issues with him, but he's definitely not one of my favorite Marvel superheroes. So having to start my Marvel reading thing with him was probably not my best decision, but that's okay. I don't think that there is an absurd number of that particular run of comics, so hopefully I will be able to finish that and move on to the next ones. Okay, we did it. We got through 16 books that I read in December. That is definitely one of my longer wrap-ups. I do try not to go on too long in these, because I know that they can get kind of boring, especially if I'm not talking about books that you've read, but I got through 16 books, so I had a pretty good end of my reading year. Hopefully soon I will be coming out with my full 2021 reading stats video, as well as my tier ranking of the second half of 2021, because I did halfway through last year do a tier ranking of every book that I read in the first half, and I think that that will finally conclude my end of the year wrap up videos. And don't forget that in the description box down below, I will link every single one of the books that I talked about so that you can check them out for yourself if you would like to. And I'll also have a Book of the Month affiliate link and a 5% off any monthly subscription on an unplugged book box subscription using my rep code, which is CAT5. Down there, you're also going to find links to my Goodreads, my Twitter, and my Instagram in case you wanted to follow me on any of those. But other than that, don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content from me, and I will talk to you guys in my next one. Bye!